My hope is that the safety of kids will be respected.
If we're not able to secure a deal, that we may move into a strike.
It's going to be a big problem. Yeah, it's going to put a lot of pressure on students.
A work to rule by CUPE members will mean less supervision of students and dirtier schools. This was day one of a work to rule campaign by 55,000 education support workers. Until a deal is hammered out with the province, union members won't be working overtime or doing any of the extra things that they say they normally do. Lisa Shing is live outside St. Mary Elementary near Bathurst in Richmond. And Lisa, it's not having much of an impact yet, but that could change in the days ahead.
That could change, Dwight, and it really depends on how long this job action lasts. Right now, we could be seeing some difference to the way the outside of schools look like. For example, here at St. Mary's, custodians won't be doing any work on the outside, meaning mowing grass, picking up trash outside, as well as doing the recycling. Now, the union says the students' safety won't be compromised, but they'll definitely notice a difference in the way the day-to-day operates. As the education minister smiled for a photo op at a school north of Toronto today, it was impossible to ignore the fallout of labor negotiations over the weekend.
My mission and my hope is to land a deal as soon as humanly possible. It obviously takes two to tango.
But education workers outside signaled their dissatisfaction at talks breaking off and accused Stephen Lecce of paying lip service.
He is saying all the right things, but there's a clear disconnect between what he is saying and what we're seeing at the table.
Job security and benefits are the main issues for CUPE, the union representing 60% of the province's administrative staff, education assistants and custodians like Jason McFarlane.
The student maybe doesn't necessarily understand exactly what my real serious role is there, but they know that I'm an important person. When we talk about schools, we think teacher and teaching, and that's it. And it takes a lot of background work to make those buildings operate and those students successful.
As of today, custodians won't be cleaning areas the ministry doesn't fund, like hallways, offices, and gyms. Other staff won't supervise children, hand out medication, or start classes, essentially jobs that teachers do. These staff members make an average of $38,000 a year, the lowest paid in the education system. Today, parents outside a Toronto school were generally supportive of them.
We need these people to do their work, and they need to be paid appropriately.
It's going to put a lot of pressure on students, so we need it to be over quickly.
Something like that will affect us heavily, yeah.
So right now, there are no new dates set yet for other talks through this week. Keep in mind as well, the province is also locked in talks with several other unions, and none of them have been able to reach an agreement.
So, Lisa, labor unrest in the fall, nothing new for teachers and education staff. Any education this time will be different from tense talks with previous governments.
Right, so the last time we saw CUPE workers working to rule was back in 2015, and they were able to reach an agreement a couple months after they started that. But keep in mind, this time around, it's a different government and different times economically as well. And this government was brought in, on the campaign promise of really balancing that budget. So I think it's going to be tough going forward to not see some kind of job action as we saw with CUPE starting today, considering there are so many issues in contention, Dwight.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, students at the University of Toronto are calling for more mental health supports after the union representing academic workers says there was a suicide on campus on Friday. CUPE says the fourth in just over a year. Alicia San joins us live now from the university. And Ali, we saw students take action last year, and we understand some are gathering tonight. What's happening?
Well, there's an emergency meeting that has been organized by U of T's Mental Health Council. It's happening in the campus pub in the Student Center building right behind me here. It's for students to talk through their grief and to talk through next steps.
From a different perspective.
PhD engineering student Sam Henry was there.
How are you doing? How are you feeling now?
I'm a bit shaken up, and so are all my colleagues. And there have been different responses, some grief, some with anger, And the fact that it's in the same building, in the span of 14 months, this has happened three times.
The Behen Center for Information Technology was closed part of the weekend.
We were escorted out by Toronto Police, by EMS, and as we were walking out, many of my colleagues, and including myself, saw what had happened. And it was the first time for pretty much all of us to be this close.
As a teaching assistant, Henry has training in student wellness support.
But even I couldn't handle all that without sort of thinking about it all throughout the night.
He's not alone.
I was in my first year and I was sitting in my room when I heard about the first suicide that happened at Behen. Flash forward to a year later where we've had our third suicide from Behen and the same thing is still happening.
The issue of student suicides on campus became a flashpoint earlier this year when students protested, calling for improved mental health supports. Administration says they've been working on it.
So immediately following the tragic events of last spring, we increased our counseling services. We've also, starting this fall, brought in same-day counseling for students who arrive expressing extreme need or crisis.
In the meantime, construction has begun on physical barriers in the Behen Center's atrium.
I think the biggest change U of T can make within the next few months and before the next semester is bringing in more people who are capable and trained of helping students in immediate crisis. I think a lot of the times the wait times drive people away from reaching out for help, but being able to bring in more counselors or therapists or psychologists to even help young people talk about their feelings and talk about what they're going through, it'll help students a lot.
Henry sought the help of grief counselors this weekend. He hopes more students seek help.
But if we group together as a community and have each other talk about it, it just gets, it's a better form of support than not talking about it at all.
It's a sensitive topic to talk about, but students bravely are. In meetings with grief counselors this week and with meetings like the one happening in this building tonight, the emergency mental health meeting. If you or someone you know needs help, you can always contact the Canada Suicide Prevention Line. And for more student-specific resources, you can check out the university's website. Send it back to you, Dwight.
Yeah, too important to ignore. Thank you, Ali. The city's latest murder victim was left for dead in a strip mall parking lot for almost a day before he was discovered. Investigators say someone actually checked on the vehicle during that time. Greg Ross has more now on the strange circumstances surrounding the city's latest murder.
This was the scene last night in the parking lot of a plaza at Kipling and Steeles. Police had just started investigating after 21-year-old Amir Narain was found dead with a gunshot wound in the back seat of his car, a 2018 black Chevy Malibu.
I don't believe that's where the shooting occurred.
Using surveillance video from the plaza, police were able to determine that Narain's car was actually left there just after midnight Sunday morning. The CBC has obtained a copy of that video, but police have asked us not to show it. Police have not determined who left the car there or if Narain was alive at the time. They believe that may have been the case.
But in regards to the people that were in the vehicle, I speak directly to you. In leaving somebody behind who could use medical aid and now is since deceased, I think it's a collective responsibility for everybody in that vehicle to come forward, provide information as to where their whereabouts were earlier on that evening and any other things that have transpired.
Narain's car was parked in this parking space for nearly 20 hours before surveillance video here at the plaza shows another car pulling up behind it and stopping. The video shows a person getting out of that car. They walk up to Narain's window and appear to look inside. Moments later, that person walks back and gets into the car they drove up in before it drives away. Not long after that, a call is made to 911.
So we did get a call from somebody we believe would have known Amir, and that individual has not come forward yet.
Police can't confirm if the call came from the same person seen in this video, but they have been able to determine that the call came from a business not far from the scene. Police are also working closely with Narain's family.
Well loved by his family, a family guy, and from all accounts, just a nice young man.
Police say the family reported him missing around the same time his body was found Sunday evening. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Gun violence and how to put a stop to it is once again in the spotlight on the election campaign trail. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been promised. This week, as part of our 5 Issues in 5 Weeks series, we are taking a closer look at what the parties are pledging. Shannon Martin joins us live now. And Shannon, it comes as Toronto Police release an update on its project Community Space.
Yes, and you may remember that project came in back in August after we saw all that violence over the long weekend. Today, the police chief says the program is working, but it does rely on government funding. We asked him specifically what would he like to hear from federal leaders when it comes to combating gun violence, and he didn't want to wade too much into politics, but of course, he says any funding is helpful.
I was screaming so loud. I heard a gunshot, and then people just from everywhere were running up and down the street.
From Saturday to Monday of August long weekend, 17 people were shot in 14 different incidents, the worst at this North York nightclub.
We have to figure out how to reduce the gun violence, but at the same time, not turn neighborhoods and communities upside down.
Police swiftly launched Project Community Space, an intelligence-led plan to crack down on guns and gangs.
Our officers have made 240 arrests and laid 525 charges.
6 weeks in, Police Chief Mark Saunders says shootings have dropped by 30%. But funding from all 3 levels of government runs out at the end of October.
So when the project's over, it certainly doesn't mean that crime stops and we all hold hands and cross over into the sunset.
I ask all of our elected officials to understand that harm, injury, and death from guns is a preventable public health crisis.
A few blocks away, more than a dozen doctors and nurses joined Liberal leader Justin Trudeau for a discussion on gun violence.
And that's why we're moving forward with significant gun control measures that will ban military-style assault weapons that have been used in mass shootings increasingly in the United States, but also in Canada.
The Liberals also saying if elected, they would give cities more power to restrict or ban handguns. It's something the NDP and the Greens say they'd support, but the Conservatives are against a handgun ban. Instead, Andrew Scheer is proposing lifetime bans for anyone convicted of violent crimes or gang activity.
Most of the debate so far has been centered on guns, which I believe is very important, but there are other things to this beyond just gun control itself.
Mayor John Tory has long called for a national handgun ban. Well, that doesn't seem likely this election, he says. There is plenty more he'd like to hear from all parties.
The 2 things that are other than gun control, one is investments in kids and families and the plans they have to make greater numbers of community investments to prevent crime and to keep people away from crime. And the second is some of the legal reform related to things like bail and sentencing.
And Dwight, Trudeau was asked specifically, how would a ban work here in Ontario, knowing that Premier Doug Ford opposes it? He said he just hopes that provinces would listen to the voices of experts and mayors who really want to tackle gun violence. When asked if he's talked to Ford since the campaign began, Trudeau said no. Dwight.
Thank you, Shannon. So, what matters to you this election? You can connect with us by email, phone, or social media. Email us at mygtelection@cbc.ca. Call us at 416-205-6000 or connect with CBC Toronto on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We will do our best to tackle all the issues that matter to you and the GTA. And what matters to us right now, Carl, is that we had this wonderful stretch. Summer was not going to finish, but this morning's feeling like a little fall when I got out the house today.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, Dwight, fall had to poke its nose in, but summer returns as soon as tomorrow. So there you go, the up and down of what we see with this season. And speaking of ups and downs, the whole weekend was a wintry one in Alberta. Some areas like Calgary International Airport, well, it was between 25 and 30 centimeters there. But in southeastern parts of Alberta, there were areas that saw over 70 centimeters of snowfall. And hey, Calgary's just warmed up to 0. They were -1 last hour, so they're up to freezing. All of this cold air in place behind us to the west, but this warmer air still has to move in. So we're going to see our temperatures cooling down later in the week, but tomorrow first, as this front moves in and our winds turn towards the west-southwest, we're going to get into some warm air, very warm air for tomorrow. Now, will it be a record? I don't think so, but it may be close. This would be the average high. This is the record from 2002, and I'm forecasting 28 to 29 right around the GTA is what we'll be seeing. So that's what I mean. And the humidity going up, too. It's going to feel like we're in the mid to upper 30s. This is the system or portions of it to the north of us. As it comes in overnight, there's a slight chance for some isolated thunderstorms, primarily kind of a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow after some patchy fog overnight. And then into the later afternoon, we'll see showers developing, and we'll also get into some isolated thunderstorms coming back in as colder air is moving in behind this system. But 16 tonight, there you go, Dwight. Never mind today, feeling cool. 29 tomorrow for you.
Summer's back. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
It may have been called Forever 21, but the fashion store is no longer going to be in Canada forever. The company filed for bankruptcy protection in the U.S., and as Diane Buckner tells us, that means it's ending most of its international operations.
Everything must go. The liquidation sale at Forever 21 started today. So-called fast fashion was supposed to be a foolproof recipe for success. Trendy styles moving quickly from the runway or red carpet to young shoppers with big style ambitions but little money. Competitors H&M and Zara followed the same recipe.
The quality wasn't that great, so I found I could wear the t-shirt a couple times, but then after that I couldn't wear it as long.
Forever 21's primarily, you don't get a ton of wearers out of their clothes.
Forever 21 says it expanded too quickly. We went from 7 countries to 47 countries within a less than 6-year time frame, says an executive, adding that sales are shifting more to online.
This was a Forever 21 location here on Toronto's Yonge Street. It closed months ago. It turns out a lot of young people are turning away from fast fashion altogether, realizing that cheaply made, disposable clothing is bad for the environment.
I know H&M has had their struggles too.
This retail specialist says younger millennials in particular are choosy.
They look at every brand and every product in terms of what is the imprint on society, but also the imprint on the environment.
I mean, fast fashion is always going to fail. I think it's high time that businesses and fashion brands are held accountable for their impact on the environment.
Forever 21 is trying to keep some stores open in the U.S. and will continue to sell online. As for exactly when it will close the stores in Canada, no word yet, but the liquidation sale clearly won't go on forever. Diane Buckner, CBC News, Toronto.
Still ahead, more than 200 of you have contacted us saying you've been the victim of an e-transfer hack.
Hacker would alter my conversation to them and alter their conversation to me. It's unbelievable.
It's an arms race, unfortunately, like a giant game of cat and mouse.
So what could the Canadian government do to keep your money safe? The latest in our investigation into e-transfer thefts is coming up. Plus.
And it's a disgrace. This whole thing is a disgrace.
Donald Trump escalates his attacks and warns of civil war as Democrats move forward with their impeachment inquiry. We'll have the latest from Washington next.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
A GTA contractor says someone hacked into his email, impersonating him and convincing customers to divert thousands of dollars via e-transfer. But he's not the only one to fall victim to this crime. More than 200 Canadians have reached out to our Go Public team, and they are frustrated that the banks and Interac aren't helpful when it comes to catching these fraudsters. Erica Johnson has more.
Sarman Sinani was working on a granite countertop for a client last March. He emailed her asking for a deposit. In May, she told him that weeks ago she'd e-transferred him almost $2,800. Sinani checked his email's trash folder and discovered a fraudster had hacked in, impersonated him in emails to his customer.
The hacker would alter my conversation to them and alter their conversation to me. It's unbelievable.
The fraudsters redirected the money to their own bank account. This ethical hacker helps companies improve their security. He says Interac depends on people keeping their email passwords secure to keep out fraudsters who've developed software that can lurk on thousands of computers at a time, searching for e-transfers.
So they could have something sitting there for months, and when the right keywords come through, the right email filters come through, bang, we've got ourselves a transfer. It's an arms race, unfortunately, like a giant game of cat and mouse.
Go Public continues to hear from people, more than 200 now, who say they've lost money doing e-transfer because their email got hacked. Many other countries don't rely on email. Payments are made bank to bank. Recently, the European Union went further, making it a requirement for all financial institutions to use two-factor authentication for all online banking, a system that only allows someone to log on to an account once they've received a code on a separate device or an email at a different email address. This cybersecurity expert says it's time Canada brought in better protections.
The government needs to tell banks in no uncertain terms that the new baseline of security needs to be two-factor authentication. It's good for consumers and it's good for the banks themselves.
Both Interac and the bank say they do plenty of public education around email security, both saying they're not responsible when cyber thieves strike. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
In the U.S., the impeachment inquiry is sprinting forward. President Donald Trump is accused of pressing Ukraine's leader for dirt on a political rival. Trump has unleashed a furious defense. His critics say he's trying to undermine the whistleblower who could testify within days. Lindsay Duncombe with more now from Washington.
In front of the cameras, the president is angry.
This whole thing is a disgrace.
On Twitter, he rages, saying that the member of Congress leading the impeachment inquiry against him should be arrested for treason. The perceived offense, Adam Schiff's opening statement at a congressional hearing last week.
It reads like a classic organized crime shakedown.
The escalating tweets, dozens since the weekend, also included a quoted reference to civil war should he be removed from office, and a desire to confront the whistleblower and the people who spoke to him or her. Lawyers for the anonymous complainant say they are concerned for their client's safety. The whistleblower is expected to speak to Congress soon. Also this week, the former ambassador to Ukraine is expected to be deposed. Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, who quit last week, will too. And the inspector general who investigated the complaint will speak to Congress behind closed doors. All this as most members of Congress are back in their districts gauging public opinion on impeachment. And there are signs public opinion is changing. For the first time, a poll released today suggests that more than half of Americans approve of an impeachment inquiry. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Washington.
After the break, how an American embargo of Cuban goods is causing big headaches for a Toronto coffee truck.
I would say at least 80% of our customers use cards, credit cards or debit, and we've lost a lot of business because of that.
They love serving Cuban coffee, but now say they are out more than 10 grand after their point of sale provider put a hold on the funds. We will explain next. It is technology you may have used. Square allows customers to tap or swipe their cards to pay for things. But for a Toronto coffee vendor, using the service led to her being out thousands of dollars. As John Lancaster reports, it appears this all has to do with the beans that go into her brew.
$9.30 altogether. Monica Mustelier sells cups of joe at her Little Havana mobile coffee trailer. But it's her dough, that is her missing money, that started all this.
Where is that money is a really great question. We're out almost, I would say, over $14,000 now.
Since late August, she says about $14,000 worth of payments she collected using Square never made it into her bank account. The problem persisted for weeks, so much so she started accepting cash only, fearing more money might go missing.
I would say at least 80% of our customers use cards, credit cards or debit, and we've lost a lot of business because of that.
She says Square Canada led her to believe it was a glitch involving what it called an acquiring processor. Now she says they've told her it's not a tech issue at all. It's about her coffee beans, Cuban coffee beans. Mustelier says Square Canada told her they use a U.S. bank to help process their customers' payments. Well, the U.S. has a trade embargo against Cuba, and the U.S. bank, well, seemingly it has concerns over payments for Cuban coffee beans. Mustelier's coffee stand doesn't do business in the U.S., and the Cuban beans are imported legally through a Canadian distributor. Her bank account is also in Canada. A Square Canada spokesperson confirmed with CBC News there is no tech problem, but did not respond to specific questions. In the meantime, Mustelier says Square Canada has suggested they'll refund her the $14,000.
We have a family, and our employees have families, you know, and they need to get paid, and so do we.
She also says Little Havana will be looking for another tech company to process payments, one that uses only Canadian banks. John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
Refund is her money. Remember, if you have a story you would like us to look into, we would love to hear from you. Just send us an email, torontotips@cbc.ca. The Liberals released their election platform yesterday, and their promises will mean billions of dollars in deficit spending. Today, leader Justin Trudeau defended that spending, while the Conservatives promised a government that will live within its means. Julie Van Duzen joins us now from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Julie, two different visions here from the Liberals and the Conservatives when it comes to balancing the books.
Absolutely. So we're at the halfway point in the campaign. The promises are piling up. And the big question is, Dwight, do Canadians even care if there's a deficit? You probably recall that wasn't so long ago, deficits were a bad word, an expletive. Back when Jean Chrétien won in 1993 and the deficit was at $42 billion, it took a long time, he and Paul Martin, to wrestle it to the ground. And most governments, certainly Liberal governments, have always made it a mantra not to run deficits until last election when all that went out the window. And Liberal leader Justin Trudeau said he would run modest deficits of $10 billion and that they would be gone by now. Well, they're not gone. And yesterday, the Liberals came out with their platform, and you can check out page 79 if you want. So if they get reelected, the deficit next year will be at $27 billion. And if they're there for the whole term, I mean, assuming they would be, it would be at $21 billion at the end of the term. So there is no plan for balanced books. Justin Trudeau says the economy is strong and that it's healthy enough that we can spend. He calls it investing. Take a listen.
There's more to invest in people. There's more to invest in communities. And that's exactly what we've put forward as a platform. More help for seniors, more help for young families, more help for workers, more help for students.
Okay, so what about the Conservative leader then, Andrew Scheer?
Well, to continue on Trudeau for a second, he talks about the Conservatives being all about cuts and austerity, but Andrew Scheer says that the Trudeau platform is wasteful and irresponsible. He says he will have a costed platform out soon, and there is a plan to get rid of the deficit in a responsible way within 5 years. Take a listen to Andrew Scheer.
He has made billions of dollars in uncosted promises that will force him to either raise taxes, break promises, or break the bank.
So Green Party leader Elizabeth May released a costed platform last week. She also has a plan to balance the books in 5 years. Jagmeet Singh does not seem to be on his radar. There's no timeline to get rid of the deficit. So Dwight, Canadians will just have to decide if this is a big deal for them when they go to the ballot on October 21st.
Senior reporter Julie Van Duzen in our Parliamentary Bureau in Ottawa. Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
Starting today, 5 undecided voters will get 5 minutes each, one-on-one with the federal party leader. Today is Liberal leader Justin Trudeau's turn. Earlier this month, Time magazine reported that Trudeau dressed in blackface and a turban in 2001. Trudeau has since admitted he failed to realize how hurtful his actions were, and it could have resulted from a massive blind spot due to his privileged background. So, Inara Hasmani from Toronto questioned Trudeau about this.
You know you're an accepting person, but when pictures come out with like brown face and stuff like that, right, it kind of creates like a question like, oh wow, is that my prime minister that's representing Canada out there? Something we really champion is pluralism. So seeing those pictures out there, first thing is, obviously I'm shocked, like, wow, okay. The second thing is, it's really upsetting to see that, something that we're really great at, and our leader is not doing that anymore.
We have been a government that has defended... We've been a government that has defended diversity, but the terrible choices I made many years ago have put not just a pall over that, but have directly hurt a lot of people who face discrimination every day, who thought of me as an ally, thought of me as a friend, as someone who was fighting for diversity. Yeah. And I am, and I very much am in my life today, but I didn't understand.
Why do you think you had those blind spots? We're about the same age. I don't have them. I have other blind spots, but I didn't have those at 29.
I think I've always been someone who was very exuberant in my approach, and I think that remains something that people can tell of me. I genuinely thought that intent mattered. I thought that because I wasn't a racist, I could do this and it wouldn't be a bad thing. And I did not understand back then, and I'm fully upfront about it, that it actually really hurt people.
For more, you can watch The National Presents Face to Face tonight at 8 on CBC News Network or here on CBC Television at 10. You can also watch on our CBC News app or on CBC Gem. The identity of hundreds of Indigenous children who died while attending residential schools in this country still remains unknown. But today, 2,800 of them were named at a ceremony of remembrance across the river from Ottawa.
Canada will never be the same now that these names are known. These children call upon us to take action to stop the harm inflicted through present-day systems that are broken, racist, and based on ongoing notions of cultural superiority.
It took a banner close to 50 meters long to display the names of each child and the school they attended when they died. The ceremony was organized by the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation to break the silence over those who never came home from the schools. Researchers and archivists estimate at least 1,600 others died but remain unnamed. The fate of hundreds of others who simply vanished from the schools is simply unknown. The Truth and Reconciliation research team will continue its efforts to fill in the gaps.
It is important for my generation to learn about Indigenous culture because we're the creators of our future, and to create a great future, we need to know what happened in the past.
We recognize Orange Shirt Day as an act of remembrance, but also as an act of reconciliation. If we understand the wrongdoings that we've done, how can we move forward individually and as a people in Canada?
The legacy of residential schools also being marked at TDSB schools as part of Orange Shirt Day. But it's not just a single-day event. In the weeks leading up to Orange Shirt Day, over 500 grade 9 and 10 students at Northview Heights have been taking part in workshops and classroom activities. The idea is to provide students with a better understanding of the impact of residential schools. Quebec owes an apology to First Nations and Inuit people. According to a new public inquiry report, it says systematic discrimination is impossible to deny. The commission heard from victims and experts about decades of abuse and mistreatment by public services in the province. Alison Northcott has more on the findings and the recommendations.
After 38 weeks of testimony from more than 1,000 people, Commissioner Jacques Vien says one thing is clear. It seems impossible, he says, to deny that members of the First Nations and Inuit are victims of discrimination in their relations with public services. Vien's report comes 4 years after Radio-Canada's investigative program Enquête revealed allegations of abuse and mistreatment of Indigenous women by Sûreté de Québec officers in Val-d'Or. There was a police investigation, but none of the Val-d'Or officers were charged. The commission was launched amid mounting pressure on the government to act. Its mandate was broad, to look at the relationship between Indigenous people and some public services. Among Vien's 142 recommendations, better training and education around the realities of Indigenous history and culture, more services in Indigenous languages, and more funding for better housing. Viviane Michel with Quebec Native Women says she's disappointed the report didn't include measures to ensure Indigenous women like the ones who came forward in Val-d'Or will be protected. Still, she and other Indigenous leaders say they recognize the Commission's work, but some wonder what will come of it.
I think people are done with apologies. What they need is concrete action.
Overall of it? At Val-d'Or's Native Friendship Centre, Edith Cloutier has worked with the women whose stories led to the Commission.
And to this day, 4 years later, they still feel unsafe. So this work of the Commission, for us, had a core purpose, was to speak out about the woman, the Indigenous woman's safety. And at this point, we have to admit that it failed on that part of its mandate.
Merci. The Quebec government says it will study the report and find solutions. In the meantime, Quebec's premier has invited Indigenous leaders to the legislature this week. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Val-d'Or.
Summertime temps back tomorrow. Colette's back after the break with a look at your forecast as we say goodbye to September and hello, October. We're back in just a few minutes. We are saying bye to September, bye to summer, but summer-like temps coming back for at least a day, Colette.
Yeah, that's right. And for the first day of October, and I like seeing that because last October, last year, wasn't the greatest month. A little bit on the cool side, cloudy, gray skies, and we're going to start off this October on a bit of a high note. These are your headlines in terms of what we're going to see in the short and the long term. So some fog patches and a few isolated thunderstorms possible overnight tonight. Greater risk to the north and to the northeast. Hot and humid, yes, for Tuesday. And then midweek, okay, we'll see the temperatures really starting to come down again, not only back to seasonal, but actually below. But tomorrow's our big warm up. So these numbers here are first number, your forecast high for tomorrow, and then the records following, because I think we'll at least take a run at some records. So Barrie, the forecast I have for you is 23, your record a little higher. Toronto, 29, yes, but the record 29.5. But look at London. May beat the record there. Hamilton could, and also St. Catharines potentially, not necessarily though for Windsor. Again, all of these are pretty much so close that we'll be flirting with some records. We'll see how it goes. We may at least tie some in here. These are the current temperatures, 17 degrees, so we've got some mid to upper teens. The warm front had made its way into Windsor. That's why they were into the mid-20s for today. This is that system, so the southerly flow will start to kick in tomorrow, so that picks up not only the temperatures, but it's going to bring up the humidity as well. All these blue here, look at all the lightning strikes associated with this system. So much of it to the north of us, but still a few little isolated rumbles of thunder tonight, not out of the question. A bit of patchy fog, also not out of the question. And then we should start off with some sun mixed with the clouds, and then more clouds really building in through the day. And then late day, as the cold front begins to approach, we start to see some thunderstorms popping up, but also just some scattered showers. So it gets a little messy as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, because we're talking about waves of seeing showers and the temperatures really starting to cool down. Overnight tonight, they are mild, mid-teens. Tomorrow, they are hot. We'll call it for October. These are hot readings. Into Wednesday, they'll look at the high there. Thursday, Friday, even cooler, Dwight. So try to enjoy tomorrow.
I will. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
The shortlist for the 2019 Giller Prize was released today. 6 authors are in the running for the prestigious literary award. We'll take a look at who made it and the big book that didn't after the break. It is the most prestigious book award in Canada, recognizing some of the best literary works across the country. It is the Scotiabank Giller Prize, and the 2019 shortlist was revealed today. Yelena Adzik was at the big reveal. She joins us now. We're going to talk about who's on the list, but first, we need to talk about who didn't make the cut.
It's the elephant in the room. It is the question a lot of people are asking today. Why is Margaret Atwood not on the short list? Well, let's take a look at the long list, because she was on that. That's when they had 12 books. They whittled it down to 6 today, Dwight. And that one that you see in the top there, Atwood with the Handmaid's Tale reference, because, of course, this is the long-awaited blockbuster sequel to The Handmaid's Tale called The Testaments. That one, when I give you a look at the short list, it is not on there. Okay, so we've got people like David Bismuskis with Immigrant City, a Torontonian, by the way, Small Game Hunting. It's a debut novel by Megan Gale Coles. The Innocents, it's by Michael Crummy. Dual Citizens by Alex O'Lean. Lampedusa by Stephen Price. And another debut novel called Reproduction, that's by Ian Williams. So some good names to jot down. I'm sure they're very good books, but as we discussed, Dwight, by the way, there's Jill Deacon up there on stage. She was the host at the event today. As we were talking, they just really had to at least address the question, why is Margaret Atwood not there? The funny answer I got at first, because I ended up talking to Alana Rabinovich, she is the executive director of the Gillers. The funny answer, I just said to her, you know Margaret Atwood, you know you're going to see her. It's going to be a little awkward, no? Here's what she had to say.
She's on my advisory board, so at some point I will see her. I think that there have been things like this, big surprises over the past many years that we've been around, and that's 26 years. Omissions, inclusions, things like that. There's always surprises along the way.
Okay, so, you know, she's going to handle it in a diplomatic way. The same goes for one of the other jurors. All the jurors are authors themselves. And Sasha Hemman, he tackled that question this way.
It was not a question of exclusion of Margaret Atwood, but inclusion of these books. And so maybe on some other day, certainly some other jury would have decided, made a different list. And so it's not a statement about the value of Margaret Atwood's book, let alone of Margaret Atwood, who's one of the greatest living writers in the world. And so we like these books very much.
I'm looking forward to reading some of them, but she is up for a Booker, which is a lot bigger than the Giller, so to not make the Giller, okay.
By the way, she did win for Alias Grace back in the 90s.
Yes.
So she's got a Giller. Also, she's pretty successful. I think she's going to be just fine.
I know she doesn't need it, but it's kind of weird.
I know, it's a question.
As for the books that did make it onto this short list, what did the jury have to say about those selections?
Yeah, so that I definitely was wondering. The question I had was, when you pick books, right, you don't pick them based on a certain theme, but does one emerge? You know, when you have 6 and you see that you've selected these, is there a certain element or a thread maybe that connects them? And this is what Donna Bailey Nurse and Amanita Forna had to say about that.
I kind of feel like there was a lot of experimental writing, a lot of writing that struck me as very sensuous and very poetic. So I thought there was a lot of that. Yeah.
I would say it was language. I mean, when I approach a book, I look at it at many levels, and one of the things that all those books share is the most astonishing language.
Okay, so they're clearly impressed. Wait, I have to add that they had another announcement. It was just that they're going to tell us who the host is, and we found out that on the big day when the winner's announced, the person hosting is Jan Arden. Jan Arden, the musician.
Very cool.
But she's also an author, right? She has her own memoir about her experience with her mother with Alzheimer's. Yeah, that's right. So I think she's an incredible choice. She's so smart and she's funny, and I think she'll bring a lot of engagement on that day. It's Monday, November 18th, so we can mark our calendars.
We love celebrating Canadian writers
Always.
and their works. Thank you, Yelena.
We'll see you soon, Dwight.
She performed for U.S. presidents, the Queen, and even Nelson Mandela. The opera world in mourning tonight after the death of American singer Jessie Norman. She was 74. I had the chance to speak with the legend herself earlier this year when she was presented with the Glenn Gould Prize here in Toronto, where she talked about the importance of the arts, especially for young people. Here's more of what she had to say as we head to break.
Art is such a part of what goes on in life that it's not even called art. It's simply called living.
Yes. Yes.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if we here in this area of the world could find that in ourselves, could bring that to children so that they have this wonderful way of self-expression that is completely positive all of their lives. They needn't become professional performers. But what we need them to know is that they have a voice inside that can be spoken in a positive manner, and children become less aggressive. They understand that they have friends who also like the arts, and that it's okay if you can't play soccer very well, but it might be you can play the hell out of a Mozart piano concerto, so that's all right too.
A new season of the NHL and NBA are about to tip off, and that means something new at Scotiabank Arena, new food for fans to eat.
We have a lot of regulars that come back every year, and we got to make sure that we are showing them something new every year. So lots of great results last year, and championship even. You know, we're always looking for the next thing.
That includes a jerk burger, a sweet Italian sausage, a barbecue vegan jackfruit sandwich, and soft serve ice cream. If none of those call out your name, there's also a kale and truffle, fusilli mac and cheese, French onion poutine, and if you got a sweet tooth like me, a s'more, please, dessert poutine. All of these treats and more will be available inside the arena. And although they are on a quick service menu, MLSE and the vendors say the quality doesn't feel quick.
At a lot of stadiums all over the world, it's about volume and volume and volume and just keeping up with the volume. At Scotiabank, and we've had a relationship with them for almost 18 years, it's about quality and then volume. And they actually care what they're giving their guests.
The culinary director says the biggest trend they're following this year, meatless dishes. Scotiabank has a record number of 11 vegan and vegetarian options now available in the stadium. And as you talk about the weather, do not mention the foot-long hot dog I ate the last time you and I were at a Jays game. Let's get to the forecast.
I have photo
Not
evidence.
vegan at all. It was like that big. Anyway, 30 seconds
Photo
left.
evidence of that.
Hot and humid tomorrow?
Yeah, we're getting treated to some heat, some humidity. It's going to feel like we're in the mid to upper 30s. The temperature will be up to 29 degrees, so close to a record for us. But late day, look for some scattered showers and a few embedded thunderstorms rolling through too. And then it all changes up and we cool
back to
down.
normal.
Yeah, well, and even below.
I need your phone to get rid of those pics. That's it for us tonight. Thank you for joining us.
Never.
We'll see you back here tomorrow.